Do you want to know the why and the how behind these shutters? Well, stick around and I'll show you how we did it. When we purchased this house a couple of years ago, we knew that we were going to upgrade the color at some point. While we didn't hate the yellow, we knew that it was starting to look a little tired. Another thing that we knew we weren't going to do is we didn't want to paint it white along with pretty much most of the newer houses around here in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you'll notice, this is the exact same color that we have on our shed that I built last year. Part of the reason why we chose this color for the shed was because we wanted to test it out and see what it would look like with the contrasting white trim. And we loved it so much that we decided to use this color as our primary color for the house. The company that we hired was SprayNet, and I will put a link to their website. Also, they are not sponsoring this video. I just really liked working with them. I would also recommend that you look for the company in your area as well, since they are a franchise. What we decided was that we wanted to build our own shutters, and I didn't really use any plans, but I did know that I wanted to use cedar. When I looked at the cedar prices, I realized that it was a little expensive. But then I walked over one aisle and I noticed that there were cedar fence pickets. I can mill these down and then I can use these instead at a fraction of the cost. These cedar fence pickets are a little bit thinner than the dimensional cedar boards, but because I wanted to use these for shutters and I knew that they were going to need to be a little bit lighter, I figured that the thickness was no big deal. I built the shutters in such a way that I have some bracing in the back to thicken it and to stiffen it as well. Once I got the fence pickets home, the first thing I did was I needed to take off the tag off the end. And the reason why is because they are stapled on there, number one. Number two, I didn't want the tag to be on there. But when I run these through my planer, the one thing that the planer really doesn't like is metal. You'll tear up your blade really badly. So I want to make sure that any metal that was in the plank, even though it was on the end, that it would be removed. And then just like our shelving project that I showed in the previous video, we ran these pretty much all the way through multiple times to get the thickness that we wanted. We didn't want to take off too much too fast. Number one, these boards are thin, as I mentioned, and we don't want to go too thin with them. The other thing that we realized is that we're only going to show one side of the fence picket, so we really only need to plane the one side. So that actually saved a little bit of thickness as well, and once we got to the desired thickness, we were able to just use the boards as is. But it took several passes to go through this planer to get the desired thickness, but I'll tell you what, when you use this planer and you're running cedar through it, there is no better smell in the garage or anywhere near it than to have the smell of fresh cut cedar all around you. We probably ran these boards through the planer about 5 or 6 times just to get the desired thickness, but I was only going, I'd say, less than 1/8 of an inch at a time because I did not want to make these too thin. We were just real careful, but in the end, they turned out really nicely and we were pretty pleased with it. Once we finished working with the planer, it was time to start milling everything down to the sizes that we needed for both the vertical pieces, the horizontal pieces, and the bracing in the back. I didn't want to take off too much material all at once, just like I did with the planer, so I just took my time and turned my driveway into a factory floor of just making sure that I went through each different piece the exact same size each time so that we were consistent. The vertical pieces were all about 5 1/4 inches wide, and then the 3 horizontal pieces were at 3 inches tall, and then the brace in the back was only about 2 inches because I didn't need very much for that part of the shutter since nobody was going to see it. Once I got the desired width, then it was time to cut everything down, and again I took off the top, a little bit off the top and then a little bit off the bottom, and that way everything had nice clean cuts, and we just worked our way through the conveyor system and got everything done. Didn't take very long, but we ended up with the exact sizes and everything was cut, and now it was time to do a little bit of staining. The stain that we chose was a Behr premium product. It is a waterproof stain and sealer. I'll leave some information about it down in the description of this video. But this is a semi-transparent stain, and the color we chose was coffee, which is why we get that nice rich brown color. Now, at first, what I started doing was using my sprayer to spray it on first, and then I took a little foam brush and brushed it on to try and get the streaks out of it. We did the rough side first, but I didn't really like the way that was working. So when we went to the finished side, I did a quick little sand with 220 grit sandpaper and made sure that everything was sanded down to a nice clean finish. And once everything was done with the sanding, then we took a nice wet rag and wiped it off to make sure that we got all of our dust particles off of the boards, because the last thing you want to do is try and put on stain or anything else like that and have a bunch of bumps and have to start doing all of the sanding again. Now, because this isn't going to get any kind of a varnish or a clear coat, we don't want to have to do any sanding in between coats, and really I only needed to do one coat. In the end, the way that I decided to apply the stain was using a foam roller, and then I took my little foam brush and made sure that everything was nice and smooth. And honestly, this worked out really nicely. Everything went on nice and clean and even, and I didn't have any real streaking at all, even on the edges. Once I got the vertical pieces done, it was time to do all of the horizontal pieces and the bracing in the back. And I had to get a little creative here on how I laid everything out to dry, because I was running out of room on my table and I didn't want to put things on the ground because then I wouldn't be able to use my garage. And this table that I use is actually on wheels, so I made sure that I put everything out and let it dry for a couple days, and then on the weekend I was able to get back to it and then start putting things together. Assembly was actually a lot of fun. Instead of trying to measure everything out every single time as I'm putting all of this together, what I did was I created a little template on my table. I created a little jig. I put down all of the horizontal pieces down first, laid the vertical pieces, and then I was able to do some pilot holes across everything. And once those pilot holes were in, I was able to screw all of the horizontal and the vertical pieces together. And then finally what I did was I went through and put in some pilot holes for these bracing pieces across the back. Now what these braces do is it allows me to put the hinges and the hardware on there, because again, the thickness of these shutters is pretty small, and so I wanted to have enough room for me to put screws in place. And I also use a little bit of liquid nails just to give it a little bit extra holding power. Once I finished all of this, I took my old shutters that I had numbered so I knew exactly where they went, because I didn't remove the hardware from the walls on the house. I left those alone, so I wanted to make sure everything would line up perfectly. And I took the old shutters and I used them as a template and reused all of the holes for me to be able to put the hardware together. Once I put all of the holes in and the pilot holes, I pretty much tossed them into the back of my truck, because the next stop for those was going to be the dump. So now what I did was I started putting down all of the hardware. Now this little piece that you see here at the very top, that's a little bracket that holds the shutter to the wall. It basically is like a little clip, and the shutter will clip onto there and it'll hold. The two pieces that I'm putting on now that are the hardware pieces, those are the hinges just for the top two, because the bottom one goes on upside down and locks everything in so that they won't slide up or down once you get it in place. Once I got all of that hardware in, I went to the wall, put it into the exact location that had been numbered for it. I was able to test to make sure that it would hold up against the wall, and then I finally was able to put in the bottom hinge to the shutter. In order to hold everything in place, I used this little clamp, and then I did a little pilot hole to make sure that nothing would split, and then I was able to attach the final hinge to the shutter and remove the clamp. This last little piece is a decorative piece for the most part. It attaches onto the wall, but it also keeps the bottom part of the shutter from swinging out. So the top clip holds it to the top, and the bottom decorative piece holds it at the bottom. And for the most part, this stays in place and doesn't move at all. And that's pretty much it. As you can see, the stain went on really nice and clear. As I mentioned before, this is a sealant, so it is really well protected. But if I have to, since it's a pretty standard color and it's a product that's readily available at Home Depot, I will be able to restain this once every year or every other year or whatever it calls for. I have to say that I love the way that it looks against our house The house looks very unique compared to my other neighbors. I really love the way it looks. It really modernizes the house. We even had one of our neighbors down the street that is from Massachusetts come by and say that we really captured the Cape Cod style of the house with the color and the cedar shutters and everything else. So pretty pleased. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this video, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to be notified of future videos, don't forget to hit that bell, and we will see you on the next one. Have a great week, everybody.